Hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webcast. My name is Andrew Barber. I'm a senior contributing editor at eSchool News, and I'll be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by Google for Education. It's titled, Jenks Public Schools Level the Playing Field with Their One-to-One Program. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to take a few moments to highlight a couple of items. First, today's event will be recorded. So in a couple of days, you'll receive an email from eSchool News containing a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation if you want. And second, please ask questions. You don't have to wait until the end if you have a question. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and then hit the submit button. I hope that at the end we'll have 10 or 15 minutes when our speakers can answer your questions. We do also have a chat function which can be launched via the brown group chat icon that you can see at the bottom of your screen. Use that chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool News team if you have any technical issues or concerns. But please don't use the chat function to ask the panelists questions. They just don't have time during their presentation to monitor that chat area. So please, if you have a question for the panelists, use the Q&A panel instead. With that out of the way, let me introduce our speakers. John Bjorn is part of the North America marketing team for Google for Education, working with K-12 schools and districts. Previously, John worked in tech marketing in Utah, where he met his wife, who was teaching high school English at the time. He's a graduate of BYU. Our second speaker, Paul Goodenough, is Director of Instructional Technology for Jenks Public Schools in Jenks, Oklahoma. During his 16 years as a classroom teacher, he has taught math, science, and computers to middle school students. He is also an adjunct professor at Oklahoma State University, where he teaches applications of educational technology to future educators. Paul is passionate about identifying the best technology for the classroom that will equip the graduates of Jenks Public Schools with the essential life skills they will need for the 21st century. The meat of our webinar today will be divided into two parts. And here's the agenda just up there for you to see. For the first part, John will provide an overview of the Google solutions and tools that are available to schools. And then Paul will share his experiences using those tools in Jenks Public Schools. Without further ado, let me turn it over to our speakers. Welcome, John and Paul. It's an honor to have you here today. John, why don't you lead us off?
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that introduction, and I'm looking forward to being able to share a little bit about what Google for Education is doing. Privileged to be able to present here with Paul as well. I'm looking forward to having him present his story because I think that's the most interesting part of this webinar. But I'll just get right into it with the overview of what we're doing here. On the Google for Education team, we talk a lot about this 60% number that you see on the screen there. And it's kind of an interesting number because 60% is the percentage of students that are currently in school today whose future careers don't exist yet. Kind of bizarre to think about. But many of the tech roles that you and I have didn't exist when we were in school. I know that there weren't any Google for Education account managers when I was in school. Chromebooks and tablets didn't exist. It just wasn't around. And so what we need to do is prepare these students and these pupils to be able to come into these tech roles and even non-tech roles that don't exist yet, to be able to prepare them by giving them the skills to collaborate and research and solve problems. And that's what we are dedicated to doing as Google for Education. I'm going to jump ahead here. I won't go into too much detail for all of these panels that you see on this slide. But technology really has changed a lot of things for us already. It changes the way that we communicate, experience the world, and most of all, it removes barriers for a lot of us. I know in this first panel, you're able to see a soldier right there, and it's actually representing one of our Google schools, Fort Sam Houston in Texas, that serves a very heavily military population. And they were able to use Google Apps and Chromebooks and enable their parents to stay connected to their students' work even when they were deployed overseas. That's a great application of Google tools. And then the image to the right of that also, it shows how technology allows other stakeholders to be involved in education. For example, you can use Google Plus Hangouts to bring experts into the classroom, like this politician here. You can bring in these local political figures to speak to a government class or have a surgeon talk to a biology student. And I'll skip over the other two just for the sake of time, but I invite you to see some more examples on our homepage, google.com/edu. So what can we do to help transform education? Google's mission really is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. That's our stated mission. And so it really makes sense for us to be so heavily invested in education. We believe that open technology is the key to improving education. So what does it really mean for a school to go Google? We asked some of our Google schools, and they told us it's not just about the technology itself. It's about adopting a culture that really extends beyond the classroom walls. It's about creating that culture of openness and curiosity, especially among our students, and working together. Going Google for education means 4 things mainly. Empowerment is one. Helping students to discover a world of infinite resources. Choice, being able to use the right device anytime, anywhere. It's also about teamwork, having students, teachers, and parents all able to work together in real time. And 4, scalability, bringing in technology that's affordable, really easy to manage. And we'll take a couple minutes to talk more about each one of these because I think they're really important. First, empowerment. When you have access to this digital content on the web, it really empowers students and gives teachers the tools to create individualized learning experiences for those students. It's important to help these students in our classrooms to discover that the world of resources on the web is always available to them. And changing the roles of these teachers from lecturers who just disseminate information to really facilitating this learning experience as kind of a learning coach and supporting students as they explore the information that's accessible to them. Moving on here to the aspect of choice. We really do believe in giving schools choice, the ability to use the right device for the school, the right device for the classroom or for the school district. Because what good is the information if it isn't available in the classroom? Teachers can only change the way they teach if students have reliable access to a device. So we wanted teachers and students to be able to use that device, whether it's a laptop, a tablet, phone, or desktop, whatever. And to be able to also use that device in school and sometimes at home or on the go too. We think that being able to access that information, it should always be secure, always be easy, whether they're using any of those devices. Next, going Google is about teamwork. Teachers say that being able to work together in real time using Google Apps is the most profound change in the way that they teach and in the way that their students learn. Collaboration fosters the spirit of teamwork, problem solving, and organization, key skills that they need for living in the modern world. So how can you take collaboration to the next level? Real time, across the world, anytime and anywhere. Google Docs is a great example of that. I remember this kind of blew my mind the first time I used a Google Doc, to be able to see my professor actually collaborating on my essay at the exact same time that I was working on it. Very cool. Something we might take for granted today, but I think is very empowering to students. Finally, going Google is about scale. Having technology that is affordable and easy to manage. With the school's budget, the price of a device really matters, and low-cost solutions give more students an opportunity to be able to have this quality learning experience. But scalability and device and content management are equally important to keep total cost of ownership low and to allow your IT teams to manage the whole device deployment. So we really take this seriously to try and make devices as cheap as possible and to make them as easy as possible to set up. All right, just a quick overview of what Google for Education is in terms of the actual products. I won't go into too much detail about all of these because I think you're probably familiar with a lot of these products. But these are our core services that we offer. And you'll notice at the top that says they're all for free, and we really mean that. These Google Apps for Education core services are free for all schools. They are ad-free as well. We don't do any sort of advertising, no scanning of students, profiles, building any of that. We try and protect student privacy as much as possible, as well as faculty privacy. And we can go into more detail about that in the Q&A section if you'd like. But one of the things I'd like to call out here is Google Drive. We recently announced that Google Drive now has unlimited storage for schools. So you'll never have to worry about students saying they ran out of storage or teachers coming to you saying they need more space for their essays or their slideshows, their presentations. Vault has now been enabled for all schools as well, which allows administrators to be in line with compliance issues, to enable some extra features around security and discovery of documents. And then finally, let's talk a little bit about Classroom here. Classroom is a new tool created just for education. It's actually the first purely education tool that Google has created, and it gives teachers more time to teach in their classroom and hopefully students more time to learn. It helps empower teachers to be able to really take control of their class by collecting and creating these assignments just through the tool itself. Kind of weaves together some of the tools you might be familiar with, Gmail, Drive, Docs, and puts it all in one easy place so that you can actually communicate with your students. You can have a live feed of assignments. Teachers can even see what assignments have been turned in, how many of them have been turned in, and maybe reach out to those students who are struggling a little bit with some of those deadlines. It also helps improve communication, allows communication on a one-to-one basis directly with the students, and helps teachers be a little bit more organized, having everything all in one place rather than spread across all these different tools. And not only are all these Google apps available to schools, but they're 100% free, like I mentioned. I'm going to be a little bit quicker here through some of these slides just to make sure I give Paul enough time. But we really do believe that devices are important for students to be able to access this information. We want to make sure we give every school and district the right device for them. So Chromebooks are one example of those devices that actually have a meaningful impact in the classroom. Their 8-second boot time is no joke, and it's really something you have to experience to believe and to see how much that makes a big difference in your life. And we have a range of devices from lots of different manufacturers, like you can see on this slide. But the real difference here with Chromebooks, as well as other Google devices, is this Google Admin Console. And it allows districts to be able to manage 4 devices or 40,000, all from the same console, all based on the web. You don't even have to touch the devices. It's a pretty powerful tool. And This allows security policies to be rolled out. It allows you to manage updates, privacy filters, proxies, everything. Anything you need to do also for PARC and Smarter Balanced assessments, making sure that your Chromebooks are ready to go for those, can all be done in the Google Admin Console and immediately pushed out to those devices. So the same devices that students are learning with and writing essays in the morning can be ready to go for state standardized assessments in the afternoon really easily. Here's just an example of Malaysia, who has adopted Chromebooks on a nationwide level. You can see some of the stats in the bottom right corner there. It's pretty impressive what they've done. 100,000 Chromebooks nationwide for primary and secondary students. You can get just a little bit of an idea of the scale that we try to enable here with these devices and tools. Moving on, I just want to touch on tablets. Tablets are made to be managed from the same Google Admin Console. They're designed to be easy to deploy. And here's just a few of the devices that are available in our tablet solution. And this is expanding very quickly. Finally, I'm going to skip over this slide actually. Sorry, for the sake of time. But finally, our Google Play for Education is really where you're going to find the content that your classroom is looking for. So we want to give teachers an access to the widest variety of quality content that's been curated, whether it's an Android app, Chrome app, a book, any video. We want to make that available and easy to use for them. Here you can see an example of these. And what's great about the Google Play for Education store is that you can sort even by state standardized assessment. You can sort by these standards to be able to easily find materials to teach these standards to your kids. And one of the other abilities in that store that you'll find is you can rent books as well as purchase them. You can do this on an individual classroom level as well as at a school level or at a district level. It gives you flexibility to set it up however you'd like. And with that, I'm actually going to turn the time over to Paul. Just a reminder, Paul is the Director of Instructional Technology over at Jenks Public Schools, and I'm really excited for you all to be able to hear his story and his experience.
Hey, thank you, John. Yeah, one thing I was going to tell you, in case you didn't know, Jenks is a suburb of Tulsa. I know if you're not from Oklahoma, you might be curious to know where is Jenks. So we're one of the many suburbs of Tulsa, Oklahoma. A little bit about what I want to share in my side of the presentation is kind of what it's been like to go from using Google in the classroom to using Google at my site, and then how we've used Google now as a district over the years. Part of my story is, why at Jenks do we use Google, and why do we use Chromebooks? Well, it originally started back in 2007 when I was still a classroom teacher, and I was looking for a solution to an excuse my students always had about why they couldn't hand in their lab reports. As a science teacher, I was trying to get my students to write more, do better assessments, but I kept on running into the same excuses, and if you're a classroom teacher, you remember these of either they forgot to save, or they saved their work on a laptop even though they were supposed to save it to the server and they don't know which laptop it was on. Also, you found that they would forget, they couldn't take it home and work on it. Or if they did, they had no way of getting it back to school because, the district really didn't want them to use thumb drives because of the risk of what they were going to bring back on the thumb drive. Or they couldn't email it to themselves because the school's filter would block their email. A whole bunch of excuses. So in 2007, I ran into Google Docs, and it really changed how I taught my class. For the first time, I had a place that my students could produce quality work, not have to worry about saving it, and really there was no more excuse on why they couldn't get their work completed. So that allowed me to really continue to do the types of assessments that teachers want to do, but many times they don't do just because of the frustration with the technology. That was about the same time, too, that the compatibility issues came up with Office, and our district switched from Office 97 to Office 2003, and if a kid saved a Word document in the wrong format, I couldn't open it. So this all led to me finding Google Docs in 2007. The first time I was introduced to a Chromebook was in spring of 2013. This, too, was brought about because of a frustration. At the time, I had a class set of Windows-based laptops in my classroom, but it would literally take sometimes 10 minutes before every student in my classroom could get on their computers and I could start class. Well, as you can imagine, as a secondary teacher, and I had 5 classes a day, 10 minutes is a lot of time to waste just to get the device up and started. And I remember hearing about this device that started in under 10 seconds. And just like John said, you kind of have to see it to believe it. I'm still surprised when I work with Chromebooks because I'm always so used to waiting for the device to boot up. So because of that, and also another problem we had was short battery life. Our laptops, as they got older, even the second year, they couldn't stay charged for the entire day. And so I spent most of my time managing cords and making sure that every laptop was plugged in. And it would always happen, one kid would forget to plug in their laptop, so the next student in the next class couldn't use it. So that was kind of what drove me to go purchase a Chromebook for my classroom in the spring of 2013, use it for 2 weeks in my classroom and collect some data. That's the science side of me, and really see the difference it makes when you have a device that has a long enough battery life that starts up in under 10 seconds, and how much instructional time saved by doing that. After using it in my classroom in 2007, I approached my principal at the time about moving it to our whole entire site. Instead of just being my classroom using Google Apps for Education, I talked to him about moving it to our middle school. And our middle school has about 1,700 students, a little under 100 staff, and the power of Google Apps for Education allowed me to easily expand from 135 students using it to 1,700 students using it. I bought a domain. We bought our first Google domain for Jenks Middle School, jenksms.com, and we saw the same benefits in the site as we saw in the classroom. One of the biggest things that was kind of a frustration for the classroom teacher was twice a year we had parent conferences. And the old way of signing up or having parents sign up for conferences was there would be a binder down in the office that whenever someone would call in, the receptionist would write down the time the parent signed up. And if you were a classroom teacher, you had to go check that binder all the time to make sure their time slots were open. And I remember the first time we started using a Google Sheet to have sign-ups for conferences, and where you could go online and see a live spreadsheet of all your time slots and know if the slot was open or not. And that's what really gave us buy-in from our teachers, was this power that Google gave them to make their life easier. The collaboration with other teachers, we used it for best practices, curriculum development. We sent out lunch lists on it. Anywhere we needed a place to have access for all staff members from anywhere, and we started using it. We used it for the middle school since 2010, so all students in 7th and 8th grade had a Google Apps for Education account. And then in the summer of 2013, I left the classroom and accepted the position as Director of Instructional Technology. One of the first things that I was tasked to do from our newly appointed superintendent was to start collecting data about how could our district go one-to-one. She created a strategic planning committee that represented every area of our district. We had representatives from instruction, information technology, student programs. Anyone that could be impacted by the one-to-one was created, and I was tasked in collecting data on what components of the one-to-one was really needed to be in place. So the first thing I knew was that we needed to expand Google Apps for Education to all students in the district. So like I said before, you saw that we moved from, I went from 135 students using it, 1,700 students, and then in the August of 2013, I expanded to all 12,000 students and teachers in the district. And Google Apps for Education allowed that expansion to be seamless. I was able to manage all of it from the Google console, and this allowed me to really impact how we use it across the district. As a Director of Instructional Technology, I'm able to apply COPA and SIPA compliant restrictions for our students who are under 13. I'm allowed to give each one of my sites custom settings that really best fits their needs for their users that use Google Apps for Education. And so since then, we now use Google Apps for Education across the district. We have sites that use Google Hangouts Air for broadcasting their daily announcements. We have our curriculum specialists use Google Docs to make a large district manageable. And I think that's one of the key things that we find Google Apps for Education so powerful in a district our size is it really allows you to manage a district this large with the collaboration tool of the Google Apps. A little bit about kind of our timeline. Our strategic planning committee was formed in August. We sent 10 representatives from the district to Chicago to visit other school districts. Of the 4 or 5 districts we visited, all but one had started with a Windows-based device and had switched to a Chromebook, and that we really noticed that when we went to visit. When we got back in October, our IT department spent October through December getting our infrastructure ready. In December, we did PD for all our freshman teachers. And one thing that we did differently this time with technology PD is I divided the teachers by subject area. And we did the technology PD by subject, not just in a large group. So we had all our math teachers together, all our science teachers together, all our English teachers together. And this really made a difference because it allowed them to speak the same language when they were learning how to use Google Apps for Education and how to use the Chromebook. We spent one half day, learning the nuts and bolts of the one-to-one, and then we revisited. We had them come back together for another half day 2 weeks later, and we allowed them time to just brainstorm on how do I integrate this technology into my curriculum. We say all the time, and I say this all the time, it's all about the instruction more than the technology. And it needs to be important that you always focus on how is this going to impact or enhance the curriculum, not just get technology in the classroom. In December, we purchased 900 Chromebooks. In January of 2014, we started a pilot at our freshman academy. We had 850 students and 50 staff members in our pilot. Also during that semester, we did an elementary pilot at our 3 sites. And these were with pre-K through 4th grade. At Jenks, we only have 3 elementaries, but 2 of them are around 2,000 students, so they're very large sites. And the goal of our pilots at our elementary was to identify what device, if it's a tablet or a Chromebook, that would best enhance the curriculum, but also what ratio would be best, because we really believe that it's not always a one-to-one if it doesn't enhance the curriculum. So we decided to get some more data before we made that decision. After a successful pilot over the summer of 2014, our IT staff did a network upgrade on our central campus, which is our high school campus, so it could support 3,500 students. This allowed us in the fall of 2014 to expand our one-to-one to all students in 9th through 12th grade. The one thing that was really cool about the Chromebooks is we were able to do this and distribute 2,500 Chromebooks in 2 days. The device is easy to set up. We really didn't have to have much hands-on from our IT department. We also did half-day PD for all our high school teachers. We started a TSI program. When we were in Chicago and we visited a school district outside of Chicago, they had a program called TSI for Technology Support Interns, where students support do all the support for Chromebooks. They are in charge of issuing Chromebooks to new students. They service and repair broken Chromebooks. They also recondition Chromebooks when a student withdraws from the district and puts it back into inventory. For a district our size, we could not do a one-to-one without this program. We currently have a full-time teacher running the program for 4 hours a day, so the program is open 4 hours a day, and they take care of all of it. And so this has allowed us to not add any work to our IT staff. Last December, as a district, we tested our state testing on Chromebooks. Of the 1,600 tests that we administered on Chromebooks, we did not have one Chromebook failure. And that means a lot because in our state with state testing, before it took our IT staff a month to get ready for state testing. They had to run network cords, they had to run all these Windows laptops in large rooms. And now with the students having the ability just to bring their own Chromebook to the testing room and take their test, it's really simplified testing. In January of 2015, we started an intermediate pilot. Just like our elementary grades, we wanted to identify what was the best ratio of devices for that curriculum. And we are still doing that Chromebook initiative at our intermediate grades. Currently, our district has 5,400 Chromebooks. And in April, we plan to do all state testing on Chromebooks. So we're very excited that we don't have to set up these large testing arenas anymore, and that students can bring their own devices to take their state test. Just like this quote from my IT director said, is one of our concerns when we talked about going one-to-one was how could our IT staff support 5,500 more devices when they already have enough on their plate trying to support the other technology in our district. Because we went with Chromebooks and because of the Google management tool, I'm able to manage all 5,400 Chromebooks from my own computer from anywhere. And that has made a difference. With state testing, I'm able to push the testing app out to all the devices with a click of a button. I'm able to set restrictions, change passwords, all of this from any computer, and that would not be possible without the Chromebooks and the Google Apps management side. At the end of it, why does Jenks use Google? Well, I will tell you as the Director of Instructional Technology, Google Apps for Education and Chromebooks have been the easiest part of our one-to-one instructional initiative. The infrastructure and the professional development for the teachers and how to integrate technology is going to be your biggest challenge when you're going one-to-one. But if you go with Chromebooks and Google Apps for Education, that will be your easiest part of any one-to-one. And I think a lot of it is, just like every teacher and every educator, Google really understands that it's all about the customer at the end of the day. It's about what the experience the teacher and the student have when they use these products. And that's why Google is at Jenks Public Schools. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Paul, for sharing your experiences using Google Apps for Education and Chromebooks at Jenks. We do have, well, we've actually got about 25, 26 minutes to handle some questions that have come in. So why don't we turn to those and get started with those. So, Paul, I suppose one of the first questions that came in was, how did you and why did you choose Google Apps for Education and Chromebooks over iPads?
One reason was I knew from experience of working with iPads that they are not easy to manage at large numbers. And so a district our size that are purchasing 3,000 devices at a time, we need something that we can easily manage and that did not require someone to touch every single device. And at the time, iPads don't really have that solution yet for the right cost. There are solutions out there, but the price per device is still too high for us to support that. So we went that direction because of the management side, the ability to manage such large numbers.
Okay. All right, terrific. Another person in the audience wanted to know about about the Chromebook console and what kind of problems, if any, that you've had as you set it up and used it?
I think there was some of a learning curve for me, but I don't think any of it was too challenging. I think the biggest probably the mistake I've ever made is when I accidentally blocked all the apps on all the Chromebooks and everybody got all their apps uninstalled. But luckily, because of the way it works, I just had to click a button and all the apps went back onto the devices. So I think the side of it is it's extremely powerful, meaning that it's very instant. And so in that way you do have to be careful, but I have not had any major issues with the management or managing the devices.
Okay. Another question that actually comes to, I suppose, some regulatory side is we had a couple of questions about email accounts and elementary students and whether they can be allowed for elementary students and how you handle that whole issue.
Well, in our district, we use the management side of it. In our elementary students, any student under 13 cannot email outside of our domain. So they're kind of within our Google domain only, meaning they can email their teacher, they can email another student, but they cannot send or receive any email from anyone outside of our Jenks domain. So that's how we've set that up. And so really for most of our elementary students, they only use the email address kind of as a login. For most part, we don't even use it to email our teachers anymore because as we move away from that side of it. But we have set up restrictions in the console to make sure that they cannot receive email or send email outside of our domain.
Okay.
I can also speak to that one really quick. This is John Bjorn with Google. As long as the account just has access to all the core services, the Google Apps for Education core services, they're going to be okay below the age of 13. The one that does fall under that age restriction is Google+. So if you do enable Google+ access, then there are specific requirements for those ages 13 and below.
Yeah, and like John was saying, for our 13 below, we have turned off Google+ for any student in those OUs or organizational units. So yeah, they don't have access to anything with Google+.
Terrific. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Paul, just coming back to you again, you mentioned in your presentation about professional development, and that I think you said there was a half day of training for faculty in use of Chromebooks. Can you talk a little bit more about professional development, what's involved, and what the reaction of faculty was to Google Apps for Education and Chromebooks? Was it an easy transition for faculty?
I would say for just like many things you try to introduce with in any really organization, many of them were hesitant because it was something new and they were not comfortable with it. Another thing that we did for those PD days to help alleviate that intimidation of a new product is once we had separated them into subject area, we also then split the group again on comfort level of technology. So we joked in our training because we were all teachers, but we had our Bluebirds, and our Bluebirds were a group of teachers that would go into another training room where a trainer could kind of walk them through more hands-on of how to do it because they were a little bit more they were intimidated with the new product. The teachers who have taken the time to try and use the Chromebook or use the Google Apps for Education love it. But there's still some hesitation of those who haven't tried it yet. They find that the Chromebook is very simple to use. We really didn't have to do much PD on the Chromebook itself. But Google Apps for Education, once we showed them some things that they can do in their classroom to make them better teachers or to make their life a little bit easier for grading or to survey their students, they really jumped on board with using Google Apps for Education. But I think in the beginning it was a lot of just that fear of some new product they've never heard of. Many of them were still very comfortable in Word and Microsoft Office. And because Google Apps for Education supports Office, they can, put a Word document in their drive and still be able to open it. I think that allowed that transition to be a little bit easier.
Okay. Now, I also see that you did do a pilot project before the major rollout. Can you talk a little bit about that pilot project? I mean, how important is it for a school district to do a pilot? And from your own perspective, what did you learn during that pilot?
I think it's very important. We do pilots, at least I do pilots for any new initiative that we do. I think that there's really no way to know all the implications or the ins and outs of what could happen until you try it, especially for a district our size when we have 850 students per graduation, that anything we do is going to have a large impact if we try to do it too fast. Or it's going to be to a point where we can't back up anymore. And so it's either going to have negative impacts on the classroom, or it's going to be financially a bad decision for the district. So we did our freshman pilot, which was one of the largest pilots that most people do, but it was very difficult for us because we didn't know what would that number be. You know, if we went too small and only did a few classes, that really wouldn't tell us about if our infrastructure could support it, because in the end of the day, even though Chromebooks can work offline, you have to have a Wi-Fi signal. And so if you don't have a good infrastructure that can support adding 800, 900, 1,000 new devices to one building, then it's not going to be successful. So we knew we had to kind of go big, but I think it's very important. We learned also through this is the need for PD, that many teachers did not know how to use technology. They've always wanted their students to have access to a device, but how do I bring this into my curriculum? And so we saw some needs where we need to do some instructional coaching of how do I now integrate this into my classroom, and actually use it more than just substituting it for something else that we did in our class. You know, during my PD, we teach the SAMR model about, you know, really integrating technology from substitution to redefinition. And many of our teachers struggled with what that looked like. One thing that we also did during the pilot is how do you manage a classroom when now you have every student has a device? Just basic classroom management skills that are new for many of our teachers, because this is a new idea that now I have a student staring at a screen and I'm trying to keep their attention, and what do I do in the classroom without getting frustrated with a piece of technology?
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for explaining that more fully. We have several questions here also about the Chromebooks you used, and how did you select which brand to use? What were the criteria you used, and what did you end up buying?
For our pilot, we first went with the Samsung one, the first Samsung model. That was the one we saw in Chicago, and at the time, it was really one of the few out there that met the needs we were looking for. It was the lightest of the devices. You know, our students carry the Chromebook to all their classes. They take it home, so we were looking for a device that had a good battery life. And at the time, the Samsung was the #1 Chromebook being sold. After our pilot, when we looked at expanding over the summer, we went with a different Chromebook because one thing that we needed was a longer battery life. The Samsung only had about a 6-hour battery life, and that's doing very little on it. Not that we had any trouble with kids lasting throughout the day, but we looked through the years of how will this device last over the years if every year the battery is going to deplete just a little bit. So we went with an Asus model. The second round, in most of our devices in our district right now, is the Asus Chromebook. And we went with that one for a couple reasons. One was the manufacturer was offering 1-year accidental damage on it. That would save our district money of repairing the devices that first year, but also it had 11-hour battery life. And so that was kind of a lot of what we went with. The Chrome OS operating system works the same on all the devices, and so that wasn't a big concern for us. But we were looking for, for example, I looked at one device that I really liked, but it had a white keyboard. And as a district, we could not imagine trying to recondition a Chromebook after a student had used it with a white keyboard. And so those are the things you had to look for is, do you really want to give somebody a white keyboard that's been used by somebody else? As I'm looking down on my Mac keyboard right now, that I wouldn't want anyone else to have to look at my keyboard. So those are the things that we looked at, but that's the model we have currently right now. before we expand more next year, we will always reevaluate the needs that we have. Is the current model meeting our needs? Is it not? If longer battery life is always better, so we're going to be looking for that. Durability, if the device, is the screen going to not get broken as easy? All those things we take into account when we go to decide. But I looked at probably 6 different models last summer before we decided to go with the one we did.
And how often, now that you've settled on a particular brand, what does the refresh cycle look like to you? How often do you plan to turn these over?
Our plan is 5 years. Is the life of that device is 5 years, and unless it needs replaced before then. But that's our district plan.
Okay. And talking about being replaced beforehand, can you just talk a little bit about your policies on breakage, loss, students taking them home and them disappearing, students leaving the district, all the issues that schools are going to face? What is the policy surrounding student possession of a Chromebook?
Well, first off, our strategic planning committee made a decision in the very beginning that we were not going to make any new policies for this initiative. In a school district, you don't want to make new policy. That just adds more to it. So we always consider that you take the Chromebook and you would put it in a sentence that this is just an educational resource, just like a textbook. So everything we've decided would be just like how you handle a textbook in the classroom. So lost, the responsibilities of the student. So we don't treat it that it's any different than a textbook, and I think that helps simplify a lot of it. So if you could imagine if a student would leave the district and not hand in their textbooks, what would you do? Many times we put a hold temporarily on their transcript before they move to another district. We contact the other district. We try to get the money back from, for the textbook. So that we do the same thing with our Chromebook. Because of the value of the Chromebook, we do offer voluntary insurance for our parents that they can purchase insurance on the device for the year. And so it's good for one school year, that insurance. Our insurance policy currently is they get one incident for the Chromebook, the charger, and the case. And that first incident is 100%. The second incident is 50%. And then after that, the insurance doesn't cover any incidences. In majority of our cases, we don't go above one incident a year. Normally, if a student breaks a screen, they only break one a year because of something they have done with it. So that's what we have done as a district to help support, lost Chromebooks, to support students who can't afford the insurance, is we decided to be self-insured. We did not go with the insurance company to do the insurance for us. And so we collect the money, we take care of all the repairs, and because of that, we have extra money to cover the cost for a student that maybe, lost a Chromebook, but there's no way that their family can, replace that Chromebook, or if they didn't purchase insurance, so we can make the repairs if needed.
Thank you. I'm just going to come back to professional development for a second, and someone in the audience wanted to know whether you offered any certification programs for your teachers and staff to better support them.
Currently, we do not. We are planning with our TSI program next year to start offering certification programs for our students who are in the TSI program, so they could get certified in Google or Microsoft or other systems while they're taking that class as they're learning how to repair devices. So no, we do not currently offer any for our teachers, but we are looking into some of those things for the future.
Okay. And then just moving on to, I would think that you talked about the implementation being in 2014, so maybe there's not been enough time. But have you seen, since you went one-to-one, has there been any data indicating movement in the school's academic performance on state testing?
We don't have the data yet because the pilot was last spring, and that was only half a year. So really, I don't think we'll be able to answer that question until after this spring, and so we can compare it with last year's state testing for students who did not have Chromebooks.
Okay. And then I also just want to come back briefly to, you said that one of the things you learned during the pilot project was that the importance of having a robust enough network to handle the additional traffic. Is this something, can you talk a little bit more about what kind of changes you needed to make to the network, and whether you, and how much you need to factor in from a funding standpoint and everything else was something, you know, a lot of people focus on the Chromebooks and the applications and less on the infrastructure behind it. Can you talk a little bit about what it took to get the district ready for this volume of traffic?
Yes. For example, we actually, at our district, this may not be true for every district, but our district, we actually rebuilt our network to get ready for this because we knew we were going to grow. And our previous network had been one that had been pieced together throughout the years, and so there was some need. So we actually upgraded our entire core of our network before we started our pilot last year. From there, currently we're only have finished the central campus, and as we expand our one-to-one, we are rebuilding our campuses. But some of the changes would be, for example, before we may have 1 or 2 access points or routers outside classrooms in the hallway. And since then, we've moved where every classroom at our central campus has an access point inside the classroom. So that was a kind of a tenfold growth at our freshman academy, from going to 5 to 50 access points. So you can imagine the cost there just to run new access points throughout the building. So something you have to consider is, you know, you're going to have an access point, at least one per classroom, if your class is going to hold 30 to 50 students, just so they have a good experience on the network. We also increased our trunk coming into our network. We went from 400 megabits to a gigabit coming in, which I will tell you that we thought we have more than enough because we haven't really peaked above 300, even on our heaviest day during finals last fall when we had the majority of our students on our Chromebooks taking their finals. But a lot of you have to think about is the future. You know, if I'm building a network now, I want to make sure that I'm going with a network that can grow as fast or as large as I want my one-to-one to be. So we really focused on that first before we even started our original pilot, because we knew that like I said in my original presentation, if you don't have the infrastructure, there's really no point of buying any Chromebooks. So the dollar figure, I don't really know. That would be more for my information technology director. But I know that we have spent quite a bit of money just getting the access points in the buildings and replacing switches in our network.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. So other people were wondering about, I know that in Jenks you did a one-to-one initiative in which all the students were getting Chromebooks. But obviously it's possible to use Google Apps for Education on pretty much any device that can access a browser. Did you look at a possibility of students being able to use any device they wanted as part of this one-to-one initiative? And maybe John can speak to this too. Is what issues school districts might find if they don't go with a standardized one-to-one with a particular piece of equipment identified, but allow more BYOD. Have you got any experience with that or any thoughts on that?
I know we did bring that up. That was one of our original ideas. And the reason we did not go with BYOD is because of the classroom teacher. We did not want to put that on a classroom teacher that they would feel responsible to try to support the multiple devices that would come to their classroom. You know, we talked to some school districts in Chicago that did BYOD and some in Oklahoma, and they had the idea that, well, the student will take care of their own device. Well, if you're a teacher and you're trying to do instruction and you need that student's device to work in order to do your lesson for that day, it does kind of go on you as the teacher, or you can't do your lesson. And we, as a district, did not want to go that direction. We considered it last year. For this year, maybe doing our freshmen and our sophomore with Chromebooks, and then our juniors and seniors do BYOD. And our committee just did not want to do that to our classroom teacher and make them responsible at trying to support multiple operating systems, multiple devices, or just the ability to rely on, hey, can I do this activity? Well, no, because this person has an iPad and it requires Flash, so they can't do it, or this requires Java, so this person can't do it. So that was kind of our deciding factor on why not to go with a BYOD approach.
Yeah, and I can speak to that as well. I think Paul kind of hit the nail on the head with it there, that it comes down to the teachers and how they manage their time. And sometimes BYOD programs can increase the amount of time it takes to get online, depending on the device students are using. That being said, all of the features are still available for Google Apps for Education for any device with a browser, basically, except for some of the security features, blocking certain websites, and especially making devices ready for state standardized assessments by locking out other applications. You can't use just any device for that. So there are some limitations there. But yeah, it might make sense for some schools and districts.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, Paul, you had talked about, I mean, one of the reasons to not do a BYOD approach was not to put the onus on teachers, and you talked about faculty development and the half day of training. Let's shift it to look at the students. I mean, we always think of them as being technologically way savvier than the adults. What did you do to prepare the students for the use of the Chromebooks, and was it a very seamless process for them? Did they take it like ducks to water, or was there some training needed for the students as well?
Well, I think part of it kind of shocked all of us, because we do have this false sense that the younger generation understands technology, and we find that many of them understand the technology that they use, but not any technology. So there was some learning curve in the beginning. One thing that we did at our freshman academy before the pilot is we went through our advisory class and we did some mini lessons on digital citizenship, how to use the device properly, your digital footprint, protecting yourself online. And we also gave them some basic troubleshooting of how do you take care of your Chromebook. One thing that really sold us on the Chromebook is, honestly, 98% of any issue with our Chromebooks can be resolved by just powering it off and powering it back on. And so really, that's all we had to teach our students. We had a few that took a little bit longer to learn it, but that's where in a classroom we kind of taught the teachers this kind of setup where you had a tech expert in each room, and that other student would help these other students in their class in case the teacher didn't feel comfortable doing it. But it wasn't really a big issue, nor really a big need to do a lot of training with our students. Just like any new procedure or website a teacher may introduce to their class, the first time the teacher would walk them through it step by step, majority of the students, that's all they needed, and then it became routine. And since in our district had been using Google Apps for Education since the students were in 7th grade, majority of our students are very familiar with Google Apps for Education by the time they got a Chromebook in their hand.
Okay. We probably have time for maybe one more question, and I'm going to shift gears a little bit on this. And one of the audience members wanted to hear your thoughts on Vault archive services. Did you purchase them, or are you using the free Vault services? And can you comment on the pros and cons of free versus paid?
We are just using the free version of it, and it's for our purposes, just our compliance issue where we can, look into email if we need to. It's been great. It's very robust. It gives my IT department the information they need. So yeah, that's what we have used with our staff email and our student email.
And I kind of just wanted to clarify something here as well. I know I really glossed over it a little bit when I covered that slide, but for Vault services, there actually is no more paid option. Vault has been made completely free, all of the features for every school that has Google Apps for Education. So this is something schools and school districts won't have to worry about in the future. They'll just be able to get all of those features.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much. I think that is about all the time that we have left for today. So As we wrap up, I want to thank John Bjorn and Paul Goodenough for their excellent presentations. They were very, very informative. And I'd also like to thank Google for Education for its support. Now, just as a final reminder, we will be sending out an email in a day or so to everyone who is attended when the recording of the webinar is ready. And as I said, you'll be able to download that and get a PDF of the presentations from that email. So that wraps up for today. Thank you so much. I'd like to bid you all a good day. Thank you very much. Goodbye.